December 10th, 1941. Clarkfield, Philippines. 08:30 hours. The morning air still carried the acrid smell of burning aviation fuel. 3 days after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese conquest of the Philippines was proceeding exactly as planned. Lieutenant Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto stepped carefully around the twisted wreckage of American P-40 Warhawks, their wings crumpled like paper, their fuselages blackened by fire. But Yamamoto wasn't interested in the destroyed aircraft. As Chief Engineering Officer for the 14th Army's motorized units, he'd been summoned to examine something else entirely. Something his superiors considered a joke. Parked near the demolished hangar, covered in dust and apparently abandoned in the chaos of retreat, sat a small American vehicle. It looked almost comically under-square, barely 132 inches long, with a flat hood, exposed wheels, and a windshield that folded down flush with the body. Captain Hiroshi Nakamura, standing beside the vehicle, couldn't contain his laughter. "This is what the Americans call military transportation?" he scoffed, walking around the diminutive machine. "Lieutenant Colonel, I've seen bicycle rickshaws in Tokyo that look more formidable." Yamamoto said nothing. He approached the vehicle slowly, his engineer's eye already cataloging details his fellow officers missed. The frame construction, the simple but robust suspension, the peculiar four-wheel drive system he could see beneath the chassis. "What do we know about it?" Yamamoto asked. "The Americans call it a Jeep," Nakamura replied, still smirking. "According to captured documents, it's their general-purpose vehicle, GP, Jeep, a child's toy with an equally childish name." Another officer chimed in. "Our Type 95 Kurogane is superior in every way. More armor, more power, proper military bearing. This looks like something a farmer would reject." Yamamoto crouched down, examining the leaf spring suspension, the transfer case, the simplicity of the design. Something about this vehicle troubled him, but not in the way his colleagues assumed. "Has anyone tried to start it?" he asked. "Why bother?" Nakamura laughed. "We have dozens of proper military vehicles. What could this tin can possibly teach us?" Yamamoto straightened up, his expression unreadable. "Humor me, Captain. Get it running." What Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto didn't know, what none of his fellow officers could possibly have known, was that the little vehicle sitting before them represented one of the most revolutionary designs in military history, a machine that would change warfare forever, a vehicle so effective that the Japanese military would spend the next 4 years desperately trying to copy it, always failing, always falling short. But on that December morning, with American forces in full retreat and Japanese confidence at its absolute peak, all Yamamoto's colleagues could see was a ridiculous American toy. Captain Nakamura ordered a mechanic forward. Private Kenji Sato approached the Jeep with barely concealed contempt, climbing into the driver's seat with exaggerated care, as if the whole vehicle might collapse beneath him. "The seat is canvas," he called out, laughing. "Canvas! Our Type 95 has proper metal seats." "Can you start it?" Yamamoto pressed. Sato examined the controls. "It's surprisingly simple," he admitted. "Almost primitive. The Americans have placed everything within easy reach, but there's no sophistication, no refinement." He turned the key. The Go Devil engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with a distinctive flat four sound that would become legendary. 60 horsepower, 134 cubic inches. Nothing impressive by Japanese standards. "It runs,"
Sato announced, as if surprised. "Rough, agricultural, but it runs." "Take it for a drive," Yamamoto ordered. "Around the airfield perimeter. Test its capabilities." Private Sato shifted into first gear. Another surprise. The shift pattern was straightforward, intuitive, and released the clutch. The Jeep lurched forward with surprising eagerness. The gathered officers watched with amused detachment as Sato drove the small vehicle across the damaged runway, navigating around bomb craters and debris. From a distance, it looked exactly like what they expected. A small, underpowered vehicle struggling with basic tasks. Then Sato reached the edge of the airfield, where the paved surface gave way to rough terrain. What happened next would haunt Japanese military engineers for the rest of the war. Instead of slowing down or stopping, the Jeep drove the Jeep directly into the rough ground, a section of bomb-churned earth mixed with mud from the previous night's rain, the kind of terrain that would bog down most vehicles, requiring recovery equipment or simply abandonment. The Jeep didn't even slow down. Its wide-set tires, with their distinctive tread pattern, gripped the mud. The suspension, those simple leaf springs the officers had mocked, absorbed the impacts without protest. The four-wheel drive system, engaged with a simple floor-mounted lever, distributed power to all four wheels simultaneously. The Jeep climbed through the mud like it wasn't even there. Captain Nakamura stopped laughing. "That's unexpected," he muttered. Yamamoto said nothing, but his expression had shifted. The troubled look had deepened. He walked toward the rough terrain, following the Jeep's path, his boots sinking into mud that should have been impassable. Private Sato, feeling the vehicle's unexpected capability, grew bolder. He drove toward a steep embankment, perhaps 20 degrees of incline, muddy and treacherous, the kind of obstacle that required engineering equipment or careful navigation. The Jeep climbed it directly. Not slowly, not with hesitation. It simply drove up the embankment as if it were level ground. The four-wheel drive system distributing power, the lightweight body, 2,315 pounds, providing optimal power-to-weight ratio, the short 80-inch wheelbase preventing the frame from grounding out. At the top of the embankment, Sato stopped. Even from a distance, the officers could see his bewildered expression. "Bring it back," Yamamoto ordered quietly. When Sato returned, driving down the embankment with the same casual ease, the mood among the Japanese officers had shifted. The jokes had stopped. The laughter had died. "Lieutenant Colonel," Nakamura said carefully, "our Type 95 Kurogane cannot do that. We would need tracked vehicles or engineering support to cross that terrain." "I know," Yamamoto replied. He approached the Jeep, now caked in mud but otherwise unbothered by its rough treatment. He placed his hand on the hood, feeling the heat from the engine, the solid construction beneath the simple exterior. "Private Sato, your assessment." Sato climbed out, his earlier contempt replaced by confusion. "Sir, I don't understand it. The vehicle feels wrong, too light, too simple, too agricultural. But it does everything correctly. The steering is responsive. The power delivery is immediate. The four-wheel drive is seamless. I've never driven anything that feels so crude yet performs so well." Yamamoto nodded slowly. "Because you're thinking like a soldier, not an engineer. You're seeing simplicity and assuming inferiority." He turned to face his assembled officers. "Gentlemen, I need to conduct detailed tests on this vehicle. Captain Nakamura, clear your schedule. We're going to spend the next several days learning everything this toy can teach us." "Surely you're not suggesting," Nakamura began. "I'm not suggesting anything," Yamamoto interrupted, his voice hard. "I'm telling you that this vehicle represents something we don't understand. Something the Americans understand very well. And if we're going to win this war, We need to learn what that something is." In the distance, another group of Japanese soldiers had gathered, pointing at the Jeep and laughing at its small size, its exposed design, its apparent fragility. Yamamoto looked at them and felt something he hadn't expected to feel just 3 days after the triumph at Pearl Harbor: fear. Over the next 4 days, Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto conducted the most thorough examination of a captured vehicle in Japanese military history. He wasn't alone. Word of the strange American Jeep had spread through the engineering corps, and soon a team of 12 specialists descended on Clark Field to witness the impossible vehicle for themselves. Major Ichido Tanaka arrived from Tokyo, a graduate of the Imperial Japanese Army Academy's Advanced Engineering Program. He'd designed components for the Type 97 medium tank. He'd overseen production improvements for the Type 95 Kurogane scout car. He'd spent 15 years studying military vehicle design. He took one look at the Jeep and shook his head. "This violates every principle of military vehicle design," he declared after his initial inspection. "The body panels are too thin, less than 1 millimeter in places. There's no armor whatsoever. The engine is exposed to the elements. The electrical system is primitive. The suspension has no shock absorbers, just leaf springs. And the weight—" he consulted his notes. 2,315 pounds. Our Type 95 Kurogane weighs 2,590 pounds, and we consider that dangerously light for military service. This is 275 pounds lighter. It should fall apart under combat stress." "Should," Yamamoto said quietly. "That word interests me, Major. Let's find out what it actually does." They started with incline testing. Near Clark Field, they'd identified a series of increasingly steep hills, ranging from 25 degrees to an almost unbelievable 45 degrees, the kind of slopes that required tracked vehicles or specialized mountain equipment. They brought 3 vehicles for comparison: the American Jeep, a Type 95 Kurogane scout car, Japan's standard 4-wheel drive reconnaissance vehicle, and a captured American Dodge WC-52 3/4-ton truck. The 25-degree slope. All 3 vehicles managed it, though the Dodge struggled slightly with traction. The 30-degree slope. The Jeep climbed it effortlessly. The Kurogane made it, but with significant wheel spin and engine strain. The Dodge couldn't maintain traction and slid backward. The 35-degree slope. The Jeep drove up like it was level ground. The Kurogane made 3 attempts, succeeding only on the 3rd try with a running start. The Dodge couldn't even attempt it. The 40-degree slope. The Jeep climbed it. The Kurogane's engine overheated on the 2nd attempt and refused to try again. The Dodge was out of contention. Major Tanaka stood at the bottom of the slope, watching the Jeep sit casually at the top, engine idling, as if waiting for something more challenging. "This is impossible," he said flatly. "The power-to-weight ratio doesn't explain this. The Kurogane has similar specifications. Our vehicle should perform equally well." "But it doesn't," Yamamoto observed. "No," Tanaka admitted, "it doesn't." They brought the Jeep down. It descended the 40-degree slope in low range with complete control, and Tanaka insisted on examining the 4-wheel drive system more closely. What he found confused him further.
"It's the Spicer system," he explained to Yamamoto, lying under the Jeep on a maintenance tarp. 2-speed transfer case, 1.97 to 1 in high range, 2.43 to 1 in low range. Simple planetary gears. Nothing revolutionary, nothing we couldn't replicate. Yet we haven't replicated it, Yamamoto pointed out. The monsoon rains came early that year in the Philippines. What had been passable roads became rivers of mud, sometimes 2 feet deep. The kind of conditions that stopped entire armies.
that turned battlefields into quagmires, that determined the outcome of campaigns. The Japanese engineers drove the Jeep into the worst of it deliberately. A muddy track near the airfield had become completely impassable. Several Japanese trucks had already bogged down, requiring recovery vehicles and hours of work to extract. The mud was thick, viscous, and deep enough in places to reach the axles. Private Sato, now the designated test driver, engaged the four-wheel drive and aimed the Jeep directly at the worst section. "This is madness," Captain Nakamura muttered. "We'll just get it stuck like everything else." The Jeep entered the mud at walking speed. The tires sank and then gripped. The four-wheel drive distributed power evenly. The weight, that supposedly inadequate 2,315 pounds, was actually perfectly balanced to avoid sinking too deeply while maintaining enough ground pressure for traction. The Jeep drove through the mud like it was a minor inconvenience. They tried deeper sections. They tried adding weight. 4 soldiers climbed in the back, pushing the vehicle to its 800-pound payload capacity. They tried the worst imaginable conditions where other vehicles had failed completely. The Jeep handled all of it.
"The tire design," Major Tanaka said, examining the tread pattern closely. "Non-directional. 6.00 by 16 size, deep grooves for mud clearance and self-cleaning. Combined with the ground clearance, 9 inches under the axles, it prevents bottoming out." He looked up at Yamamoto. "Lieutenant Colonel, every element of this design is optimized for off-road performance. Not one aspect prioritizes style, comfort, or appearance. Everything serves tactical mobility." On the 5th day, they made the discovery that would change everything. Major Tanaka had been obsessed with understanding the Jeep's weight advantage. He'd measured every component, calculated every specification, tried to determine where the Americans had made their compromises. Because there had to be compromises. You couldn't make a vehicle this light and this strong without sacrificing something. That was fundamental engineering. Except the Americans had.
"The frame," Tanaka explained to the assembled officers, pointing to the Jeep's chassis. "They're using stamped and welded steel construction rather than our riveted approach. It's lighter, stronger, and faster to produce. The body panels are stamped steel, not cast. The hood is a single piece. Everything is designed for mass production."
"Mass production of an inferior product," someone suggested.
"No," Tanaka said firmly. "That's what I thought initially. That's what I wanted to believe. But I was wrong. This isn't simplified design to reduce quality. It's simplified design to enable quantity without sacrificing quality." He paused, pulling out a document they'd found in the captured Jeep's toolkit.
"Gentlemen, this is a technical manual, standard issue for every Jeep operator. It's 48 pages long and explains every system in simple language with clear diagrams. Any soldier can perform basic maintenance with minimal training." He held up another document. "This is a parts list. Every component is numbered, standardized, interchangeable. If something breaks, you don't repair it, you replace it. Field replacement time for a complete engine, 4 hours with basic tools." The implications settled over the room like a weight. "They've designed this vehicle not just for performance," Yamamoto said slowly, "but for mass production and field maintenance by unskilled personnel. This isn't a military vehicle in the traditional sense. It's an industrial product applied to military purposes." "How many have they produced?" Nakamura asked. Tanaka consulted captured documents.
According to these records from early 1941, Willys Overland and Ford together are producing approximately 400 vehicles per day. The room fell silent. Per day? Someone whispered. Our entire Kurogane production for 1941 will be approximately 4,500 units, another officer noted. If the Americans are producing 400 per day, that's 146,000 per year, Yamamoto finished quietly. If those numbers are accurate. They weren't accurate. The numbers were actually much worse, or better, depending on your perspective. By 1945, American Jeep production would exceed 640,000 units, but the Japanese engineers didn't know that yet. What they did know, standing in that room at Clark Field in December 1941, was that they'd fundamentally misunderstood their enemy. Major Tanaka's report reached Tokyo on December 20th, 1941. It landed on the desk of General Akira Nishihara, head of the Army Technical Bureau, like a bomb. Nishihara read the report twice. Then he read it again. Then he called an emergency meeting of the Empire's top automotive engineers. "Is this accurate?" he demanded, holding up the pages. "These performance claims? These production numbers?"
"I've reviewed Tanaka's data personally," replied Kiichiro Toyoda, president of Toyota Motor Corporation. "The performance claims are verified by multiple observers. The production numbers, those we cannot fully verify, but they align with what we know of American industrial capacity." Nishihara looked at the specifications again. "Can we build something equivalent?" "We can build something similar," Toyota answered carefully. "Whether we can match the American design philosophy, prioritizing production speed and field serviceability over refinement, that's a different question." "I'm not asking for philosophy," Nishihara snapped. "I'm asking for capability. Can Toyota produce a vehicle with these specifications?" Toyota glanced at his chief engineer, Hanji Umehara, who'd accompanied him to the meeting. "Yes," Umehara said, "but there will be challenges." "Explain."
Within weeks, Toyota began development of what would become the AK-10, the Japanese Army's attempt to create their own Jeep. Hanji Umehara led the design team with unusual freedom. General Nishihara's orders were explicit: copy what works, improve what you can, but prioritize production speed above all else. It should have been simple. The Jeep's design was right there. They had the captured vehicle. They had measurements, specifications, technical manuals. They even had photographs of American production facilities from pre-war trade publications. But simplicity, they discovered, was harder than complexity. The frame design, Umehara explained to his team in January 1942, appears straightforward, but
"The Americans are using advanced welding techniques we've only recently developed. Our production facilities aren't equipped for this type of continuous welding at scale." "Can we modify the design?" someone asked. "We can," Umehara confirmed, "but every modification adds weight or reduces strength. The Americans achieved optimal balance. Any change moves away from optimal." They struggled with the transmission. The Jeep used a Warner Gear T84 3-speed transmission paired with a Spicer 18 transfer case. Simple, robust, easy to maintain. Toyota's engineers could replicate the design. But Japan's gear-cutting machinery wasn't as precise as American equipment. The gears they produced were close, within acceptable tolerances for Japanese standards, but not as smooth, not as durable, not as quiet. "It will work," Umehara assured his team, "but it won't work as well." The same pattern repeated with every system. The engine, they could build a similar displacement 4-cylinder, but not with the same power output or fuel efficiency. The suspension, they could copy the leaf spring design, but their metallurgy wasn't quite as advanced, resulting in springs that were either too stiff or not durable enough. The body, they could stamp steel panels, but not as quickly or as consistently. By mid-1942, Toyota had produced their first prototype, AK-10. It looked remarkably similar to the American Jeep, 80-inch wheelbase, open body design, four-wheel drive, similar dimensions. General Nishihara came personally to observe the testing at Toyota's proving grounds near Nagoya.
The AK-10 performed adequately. It climbed hills reasonably well. It handled mud better than the Type 95 Kurogane. It was lighter than most Japanese military vehicles. Soldiers could learn to maintain it with basic training, but it wasn't a Jeep. It couldn't climb the same grades. It bogged down in conditions the Jeep handled easily. Its engine was less reliable, its transmission was noisier, its body panels fit less precisely, and most critically, it was slower to produce. "How many can you manufacture per month?" Nishihara asked Toyota bluntly. Toyota exchanged looks with Umehara before answering. "With our current facilities and materials allocation, approximately 40 to 50 units per month. We could increase that to perhaps 100 per month if we received priority for steel allocation and machine tools." Nishihara did the math silently. 100 per month was 1,200 per year. The Americans, according to intelligence reports, were now producing over 500 vehicles per day, 180,000 per year. The ratio was almost incomprehensible. "Why?" Nishihara demanded. "Why can't we match their production rate?" "Multiple factors," Toyota explained. "The Americans designed the Jeep from inception for mass production. Every component is standardized, simplified, optimized for assembly line manufacturing. Our vehicle incorporates more hand fitting, more individual adjustment, more traditional craftsmanship." "Then eliminate the craftsmanship," Nishihara ordered. "It's not that simple," Umehara interjected. "The American industrial system is fundamentally different from ours. They have automated stamping presses that can produce body panels in seconds. We're still using semi-manual processes. They have precision gear-cutting machines. We're working with equipment that requires skilled operators and constant adjustment." He paused. "General, the Americans didn't just design a better vehicle. They designed a vehicle that their industrial system could produce in vast quantities. The Jeep is optimized not just for tactical performance, but for American manufacturing capabilities." "And we can't replicate that system?" Nishihara asked. "Not quickly," Toyota admitted. "Not without years of investment in new machinery, new techniques, new training. We're trying to copy the output without having built the system that produces the output." Nishihara looked at the AK-10 prototype sitting in the test yard. It was a good vehicle. In some ways, it was actually superior to the Jeep. Better interior finish, smoother ride, quieter operation. But there was only one of it. And by the time Toyota had produced a dozen, the Americans would have produced tens of thousands. The general turned away from the prototype. "Continue production," he ordered. "Manufacture as many as you can with available resources, but don't expect this to change the strategic balance." By war's end, Toyota had produced exactly 497 AK-10 vehicles. The story of the Jeep revealed something deeper and more troubling than a tactical equipment advantage. It exposed a fundamental blindness in Japanese strategic thinking, a blindness that extended far beyond military vehicles. In late 1943, Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto, now Colonel Yamamoto after a promotion, attended a classified briefing at Army General Headquarters in Tokyo. The subject was American logistics capabilities in the Pacific Theater. Intelligence officers presented reconnaissance photographs showing American supply bases on newly captured islands, Guadalcanal, Bougainville, the Gilbert Islands. Each photograph showed the same pattern: massive stockpiles of equipment, vast motor pools filled with vehicles, supply depots that dwarfed anything Japan could establish,
And everywhere, were jeeps. We estimate, the intelligence officer reported, that the Americans have deployed approximately 40 to 50,000 jeeps across the Pacific Theater. They use them for reconnaissance, command and control, medical evacuation, supply transport, communications, and dozens of specialized roles. 40,000 vehicles. Japan's entire military vehicle production for 1943, all types combined, was approximately 30,000 units. The Americans had deployed more jeeps alone than Japan had built military vehicles of all categories. "How is this possible?" a general demanded. "How can the Americans produce vehicles in such quantities while simultaneously building ships, aircraft, tanks, and everything else?" Colonel Yamamoto, sitting in the back of the room, spoke for the first time. "Because they've industrialized warfare in ways we never conceived." The room turned to look at him. "Explain," the general ordered. Yamamoto stood, organizing his thoughts. "When I first examined a captured Jeep in December 1941, I thought I was analyzing a military vehicle. I was wrong. I was analyzing an industrial product that happened to serve military purposes." He gestured to the photographs on the briefing boards. "The Americans didn't design the Jeep to be the best possible military vehicle. They designed it to be a vehicle that their industrial system could produce in overwhelming quantities while maintaining adequate performance. Every design choice reflects that priority. The simplicity we mocked, the exposed engine, the minimal bodywork, the agricultural aesthetic, all of it serves production speed. They can train workers to assemble Jeeps in days. We need months to train craftsmen for equivalent vehicles. The standardization we overlooked, every part numbered, every component interchangeable, every system documented for field repair, all of it enables logistics at scale. They can ship crates of replacement parts anywhere in the world and any mechanic can install them. The specifications we dismissed as inferior, the lightweight construction, the simplified transmission, the basic suspension, all of it optimizes for their strategic situation, fighting a war 6,000 miles from their homeland, requiring vehicles that can be transported in quantity and maintained by average soldiers." He paused. "Gentlemen, we made a critical error. We evaluated the Jeep as an isolated product, one vehicle compared to another vehicle. We should have evaluated it as a symptom of an entire industrial philosophy." Another officer spoke up. "Even granted all that, Colonel, what does it matter? A Jeep is just a scout car. It doesn't change battlefield outcomes." "Doesn't it?" Yamamoto responded. "Every American battalion has dozens of Jeeps. That means every American commander has mechanized reconnaissance, rapid communication, and flexible logistics. Their officers can travel to the front in minutes. Their wounded reach medical care in minutes. Their supplies move forward continuously. Meanwhile, our commanders walk. Our wounded are carried by hand. Our supplies move by cart or porter. The Jeep doesn't win battles directly. It wins battles by making everything else more effective." The briefing continued, but Yamamoto's thoughts drifted back to Clark Field in December 1941, to that first moment when he'd seen the small, dusty vehicle that his colleagues had mocked. He'd known then, on some instinctive level, that something was wrong, that something about the Jeep represented a deeper problem than enemy equipment superiority. Now, 2 years later, he understood what his instincts had been trying to tell him. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It was proof that America was fighting a different kind of war, an industrial war, a war of production capacity, a war where quantity became its own form of quality. Japan had spent decades building a military focused on warrior spirit,
tactical excellence, and elite equipment operated by highly trained specialists. The samurai tradition, modernized and mechanized. America had built a military-industrial complex that could bury opponents under sheer weight of material, not because their individual vehicles were unstoppable, but because they could produce them faster than enemies could destroy them. By late 1944, the Americans were producing one Jeep every 80 seconds. Every 80 seconds, somewhere in America, a new Jeep rolled off an assembly line, fully functional, fully equipped, ready for immediate deployment to any theater of war in the world. Japan's response? The Toyota Aki-10 peaked at 100 units per month, one every 7 hours. The Americans produced more Jeeps in a single day than Toyota produced Aki-10s in a month. And the Jeep was just one product. The Americans were producing them while simultaneously building thousands of aircraft, hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of trucks, millions of weapons. The industrial capacity gap wasn't just large, it was categorical. It represented a different understanding of how modern warfare functioned. Colonel Yamamoto wrote in his private journal in November 1944, "We have been fighting a 19th century war with 20th century weapons. The Americans are fighting a 20th century war with 20th century industry. The outcome was determined before the first shot was fired." The story of the Japanese engineers and the captured Jeep didn't end with World War II. It echoed through the decades that followed. After the war, Toyota sent engineers to study American manufacturing techniques. They examined the assembly line methods, the standardization principles, the focus on production efficiency that had enabled the Jeep's mass production. Those lessons became the foundation of the Toyota production system, the manufacturing philosophy that would eventually make Toyota one of the world's largest automakers. The irony was profound. Japan's attempt to copy the Jeep failed during the war, but their study of why the Jeep succeeded revolutionized their entire industrial approach afterward. Kiichiro Toyoda, reflecting on the war years, admitted in a 1950 interview, "We tried to build our own Jeep and failed, but in failing, we learned what real industrial excellence meant. The Americans taught us a lesson we'll never forget." The Jeep itself became legend. Of the 647,925 Jeeps produced during World War II, they served in every theater, in every role imaginable. They landed at Normandy. They crossed the Rhine. Of the 647,925 Jeeps produced during World War II, they served in every theater, in every role imaginable. They landed at Normandy. They crossed the Rhine. They fought in the Pacific Island campaigns. They served in North Africa, Italy, Burma, and China. Eisenhower called the Jeep one of the three tools that won the war, alongside the Dakota transport aircraft and the atomic bomb. That assessment, placing a simple quarter-ton vehicle alongside nuclear weapons, captured the Jeep's true impact. But perhaps the real lesson of the Jeep wasn't about vehicles at all. When Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto first examined that dusty, small American vehicle at Clark Field in December 1941, he was looking at something revolutionary. Not because it was technologically advanced, it wasn't. Not because it represented brilliant innovation. The design borrowed existing ideas. The Jeep was revolutionary because it embodied a philosophy. That military effectiveness came not from perfection in individual weapons, but from adequate performance multiplied by overwhelming quantity. Japan designed vehicles like the Type 95 Kurogane to be refined, sophisticated, and operated by skilled specialists. America designed the Jeep to be simple, robust, and operated by anyone after minimal training. Japan optimized for quality. America optimized for scale. Japan built 497 AK-10s. America built 647,925 Jeeps.
And that difference between hundreds and hundreds of thousands determined the outcome of the war more surely than any individual battle. The Japanese engineers who laughed at the captured Jeep in December 1941 weren't wrong about what they saw. The vehicle did look crude, agricultural, unrefined compared to Japanese military vehicles. They were wrong about what it meant. They saw a simple vehicle. They should have seen an industrial philosophy. They saw American crudeness. They should have seen American genius. They saw one Jeep. They should have seen 647,925 Jeeps rolling off assembly lines, unstoppable, inevitable, overwhelming. By the time they understood their mistake, it was far too late. The Jeep won the war not by being perfect, but by being everywhere. And sometimes, everywhere is enough.